Okay. I'm gonna skip the introduction on this one because I just want to get right to the point of it, because this is a two-part question that is at the core of my vexation at the moment because they're very serious topics. No introduction, let's go into it. Question 7A. Why has the media been allowed to spin propaganda? That's not an opinion. I do believe that at this point it is a solid fact that the media has definitely spun propaganda out of this, or has spun an edge out of this situation in order to gain traction for a response, and that response has been heavily biased. Heavily biased. Yes, there is another part to it. Yes, this is a two-part question. Let's get straight in there. Now, I've said this before in other videos. I'm going to say it again because it's relevant. Death rates. We've already spoken about how the media has been publishing nothing but death rates. Nothing but death rates. Not a recovery rate in sight. Not nothing. Every single time it's just how many have died today? How many have died today? How many have died today? It's and again, as I've said before, it was fine at the start because it was there was a need for it, or there was a provision for that kind of spin to come because it was new. But then after a while, it's not new, and after a while, there are recovery rates to report on, and all they've been doing is keep going on about it everywhere. It's just fear, and in fact, the fear incited, if you remember me talking in this initial video where I made on this series, and I said about panic buying happening at one point, aside from the corporate side of effective panic buying, I said panic buying happened one more time, and I said TBC. Well, this is the TBC, because I put out a tweet, a very special tweet. I actually went above and beyond and actually exposed my mental health condition on Twitter. I got an A4 piece of paper and I wrote down a very small statement, which I thought was reasonable enough that drove home the point, but also but also gave me a little bit of vulnerability. I felt very deeply uncomfortable about doing it, but I needed to. Because I went out one day, this was way after panic buying had settled down. And because they were reporting on all the kids that were dying, because I do believe, and this is how it followed, that all the kids were being reported as dying, the pregnant woman, a couple of people, and all these hashtags that come up with rest in peace this person, rest in peace this person, which is to be expected. People are allowed to voice their sympathies, but what happened was people started responding by panic buying again. And I went out, and I can't remember what the exact thing was. I think the salad was taken. The hand wash was gone as well. Went to get some soap, that was it. Went to get some soap and the hand wash had gone. Now, obviously hand wash has been off, but when I asked more about it, I had been told that people have started panic buying down here again, and I couldn't take it. Mainly because, as I say, with my mental health condition, I don't go out much. I hadn't have gone out much by then. Now I'm trying to go out as often as I can for my mental health condition because it's affecting me indoors. I'm not going to go into that. But going outside, not shopping, meant that I needed to get my shopping there and then. And because panic buying kind of affected me too, because I had to go to different shops. I had to shop longer and further and I wasn't about to see a sharp decrease in my mental health when it was already kind of, affected by what was going on. And so I wrote this A4 and I tweeted it. Again, completely almost unheard. I don't even know if it's been heard at all. But I needed to, and I tweeted it to all of the news organisations. And I tweeted a couple of tweets to all the organisations. I did it during the lockdown decision to remind people not to remind the government and the newspapers to not. I did it to Boris Johnson. I don't know if the newspapers got it too. To remind them not to over-exercise their powers on lockdown. But this is what I did. I spreaded my message basically, and I can't quote word for word. It's not in front of me. But it basically said how my mental health condition affects me when I'm around social people and indoors. People's mental health conditions matter. And mental health in general matters to anybody who's got it, regardless or not. So spreading bad news, completely bad news, isn't right. There are recovery rates. Report them. right? It was the long and short of what I said. And I stick by that because it hasn't happened and it didn't happen. And now it's finally being spoken about. And so, yeah, but that incited, like, that alone, people have a right to feel sad. But once you get people rallied up enough that they're willing to just go back into a frenzy, that's not helpful for anybody at all. Also, another point to talk on the media. Now, let's talk about Boris Johnson getting sick, because we covered that in some earlier video. You talked about elite sickness. And I found it very interesting because, as I said, I've been going and tweeting every day and logging off, but I generally get to glance at tweets as and when they appear. Just sort of what's trending. It's there when you log into Twitter. And I noticed that Boris Johnson got sick, as you know. But what I also noticed was the chain of events that followed. Boris getting better. That was the voice of support that came from me. I expected it. I thought it was great that people said, I hope Boris is going to be fine. Then Boris Johnson went into hospital. It rallied up. We weren't sure what was going to happen. Nation pulled its breath out. Then Boris started getting better. Now, I understand that there's a narrative of why people are annoyed at the government, but this isn't what I saw. What I saw was a nation seeing that Boris got sick and voicing support for Boris. Then Boris got more sick and then they voiced more support for Boris. Then Boris got better. Just about. He got out of hospital and went into his own isolation, and people turned on Boris. Now, I don't know what the story was. I'm not even going to bother reading it because I don't need to. It'll be some kind of a failing. I believe he missed the Cobra meeting at the start. Cobra being the meetings that they have when they talk about emergency action to do with, just stuff like this, like emergency risk assessments and stuff like that, right? He missed a couple of them, which I think there was an edge on how this government contributed to a lack of oversight for the deaths. It doesn't matter. The point is, I watched people turn their opinions based on the narratives of the news that was coming out. And I'll tell you for a fact that no one was fact-checking because there were no facts to check. Because people, these newspapers were coming out and saying this, and this. It doesn't matter what it was. The way that people's rapid opinions changed from saying, we love you, Boris, get well soon, Boris, to in a matter of days when the guy's out and he's still frail, God knows he hasn't got better, they suddenly turn around and there's hate. Sack Boris. Like they're all pinning it on Boris because the funny thing about this country is the same as one that's in every country. When there's a problem, when it's good, we praise the government. When it's bad, we blame an individual. Every time. That's why we've had every single one of our prime ministers has caught the individual responsibility of the whole government. Every single one of them. And I'm not discrediting them. Listen, I've got things to say about Tony Blair. I've got things to say about David Cameron. I've got things to say about Theresa May. But it doesn't matter. The long and short is that the individual always catches the flack of the whole narrative every time because they expect the one person to be invincible. And I just couldn't believe the way that people did it. It's like, I genuinely thought that, being as everybody's, busy investing, into watching people recover, that they give the same to Boris. I don't care if the government failed or didn't. The point is that if you're turning around and saying, Boris could welcome, get better, you're going to at least wait for the guy to get better and this to be over before you start firing out who's wrong with what. I know people are frustrated and I know people are angry, but I also know full well that the main reason why people started launching into Boris was because of the news. And the news seems to have its own narrative on not reporting recoveries versus death rates, but seems happy enough to chomp on its reports with regards to the government failings halfway into government recovery, and people responded to that. And I found it really intriguing that the media. I keep saying this to people, and I'm gonna say it because I feel like I'm educated enough because I've watched the media spin their reports on all of the walls we went to, and they spun their reports on. I'm not going to get into it. So the long and short is that people forget that the media isn't... You don't watch the news and get facts. Yes, it's factual stuff, but you don't get facts because the media doesn't have an obligation to be factual. The media is categorized as entertainment in a legal, from a legal perspective. It's in the public sector, it is under entertainment. Look it up. It's not factual. It's entertainment. The news legally can lie to you. legally can spin a story for entertainment purposes if they want to. They have to be careful about legalities, about defamation and stuff like that, but it doesn't matter. The point is that they can, because they're under entertainment. Look, the media is a business. Just like the business you might work for or business that you know about, it needs to turn a profit. It turns profits by making sales. It makes sales by having a big story. That's why the story is glamorous and shocking. We already know that about headlines. The headlines are dun-dun, right? But let me tell you something about media. There is no good news. There are good articles, but there is no good news. The point of the media is to give you all the worst bad news in the most shocking way you can get. Its stories are picked up from exacerbating the most shocking and profound things that are going on right now. That is the media. That's what the media is for. So when you turn on your TV and you see the media say some bad stuff, it's saying it obviously because it's happening, but it's saying it to you for ratings. It's saying it to you because it wants to be in the midst of that gripping story. And I've seen so many incidences about the media. I'm not going to begin to talk about the media and propaganda. But I want to say that for coronavirus, and for something as pivotal as this, where it was important to be factual, I cannot believe that the government have been like that. Which brings me to the darkest point of all my questions. 7B. Why is the government saying the same? Because if I had this little rant, 10-minute rant on media, you better believe that I cannot fathom, if you want to say what you want about the news and how expected it might have been, why is it that the government is concurring with the news? I watched only a handful of the BBC speeches. I stopped. You see, they do these speeches where they talk about stuff every night, about what's the updates and going on, blah, blah, blah. I saw the headlines. I saw the death rates. I know for a while that they were talking about death rates and everybody, the government message, protect the NHS, stay inside, da-da-da, right? But I could not believe that even the government hasn't been talking about recovery rates. They might have mentioned it once or twice, I'm sure, but even they haven't exacerbated the importance of focusing on the fact that this isn't a life or death situation. Even the government have been allowing the media to narrate how they want. And I can't believe that. I can't believe that the government haven't even said anything about it. Because, look, the government are adults. Their job is to be responsible for all of us, right? And forgive me, but didn't it become that a few years ago, mental health was at the core of how our thinking curve came? We found out that mental health was being undervalued. And so we put it to the forefront of everybody's mindset when it came to approaching stuff now. So then why is it when you have people in such an environment that exacerbates the need for mental health stability, would you start off by assuring everybody that this is terrifying, then assuring everybody that everything's going to shut down, then assuring everybody that they're going to have to stay inside and have minimal freedom, and then round it off by repeatedly telling everybody that people are dying? Don't you dare, government, sit here and tell me, don't you dare tell me that it is all in the name of public health, because you have a duty to care for people's mental health. You have a duty to remind them of positives, and you can't just flash a load of videos, little clips of people, being nice to each other. That's your job too, not people's job just people's jobs. Recovery rates exist, report them. People are doing nice things, report that. Climate change is happening, report that. Not just the media, the government too. That's what a good government does. It doesn't just cater to people to reassure them that it's being professional. It reassures people that other things are happening, that there is light in a cloud of rain, whatever you want to call it. I know there's a thing, a line, silver lining in the clouds. And yeah, man, this is where I come into that TBC of the NHS clap. Again, I'm going to say this because I said this in another video and people might have watched the other video before. I fully respect the fact that we're all clapping for the NHS. The NHS are doing a profound job. I was a carer. I care for people with mental health difficulties and physical health difficulties. I worked for MenCap and I worked for myself. I am all about care. I cared for some family members before they died. I've cared for children. My long and short is that I value the care system as much as anybody else. But the clapping for NHS, let me tell you two things I have a problem with when it comes to the clapping for the NHS. First and foremost is the media propaganda, and there was media propaganda. If anybody else remembers that there was claps on TV, and did you notice that everybody from the hospitals was all clustered, they were all clustered around each other, clapping. They weren't 2 meters apart. Basically, you could see that the cameraman had arrived on set and said, right, we're going to film everybody doing the claps, for the hospitals as a piece to illustrate the claps for NHS and the fact that it's unified. These people, and these are NHS professionals, by the way, they're all next to each other, they're all side by side. Makes me feel like that it was more orchestrated than a natural thing, because naturally people are going to be respecting each other's distances. I'm not saying they are or aren't, but I'm saying that kind of highlights a bit of more of a negative image on the claps. But regardless, my main problem is this. The NHS claps should have been a positive, unified step, which I'm hoping that it still is for most of you. My issue is that the NHS claps seems to have had a different effect. Combined with all of the bad news that we've been given and all of this kind of oversight of you're probably going to die, and look at all the deaths and look at all the children dying and the pregnancy dying, it seems that the claps are claps of despair. Forgive me if you feel like I'm wrong, you're entitled to disagree, but this is how I see it. People seem to be going out every Thursday at 8 o'clock to clap for the NHS in hopes, in despair, to feel this kind of energy that people are dying all the time. The NHS are at their last wits, and the NHS are risking their very lives going in there all the time. And even though it might be true for some, and there are definitely deaths for some, what I'm saying is that these NHS claps would be more positive if there were more positive injections in there, such as the recovery rates. Instead, people seem to be going out and it seems to be their only sole focus of joy, and that's dangerous. That's very dangerous, because if your sole base of joy isn't just a positive thing, because the NHS thing, it seems like a positive thing on the surface, but in fact we're actually clapping for them combating death. That's not a positive thing to celebrate, right? We're saying, oh, well done for working so hard because it's such a terrifying situation. That's reinforcing the negative as well, and so you've got to balance the two. Again, I'm not shooting down the NHS claps completely. I'm just stating, wonderful NHS people, I love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. There is a real need to say thank you. I understand that. I've worked in the system. What I'm driving home here is that the narrative that the media and the government have been reinforcing alongside it has pushed the NHS claps for me into a different place. I have never seen people more at a point where I've literally seen them tear each other apart for even suggesting that it's not the worst thing that's ever happened in the world, and they'll call this the worst thing that ever happened in the world. And do you know why they'll do it? Let me be brave and say something. They'll call this the worst thing in the world, not because of the death rates. They'll call this the worst thing in the world because everybody went on lockdown. If everybody hadn't gone on lockdown, this would just be another SARS. That is to say that it would warrant a serious thing worth talking about and worth remembering from, like SARS was, but it wouldn't have had everybody's attention as it would if we didn't have total lockdown. Now, mental health, because this is 18 minutes, and I kept this one the longest one for a reason, because I wasn't just going to end it by blasting the government and the media without talking about mental health a little bit longer. The NHS have unravelled a mental health plan. They did it a couple of weeks ago. They turned around and said, so we're now going to unravel this plan for mental health. I tweeted by saying well done, but also pointing out that it's very, very, very late for them to be doing that. Because they're doing mental health for, I believe it's for children, with children and parents at home to look after their children's health. Great news, but it just illustrates just how late it came. And I feel like even though things are turning around now, I just feel like it had to be said. And so I'm going to end it like that by simply saying that the government and the media have a lot to answer for as far as I'm suggesting, but it can't be not said that there isn't a turning point, that they are starting to think about mental health in a bit, and there have been starting to have I'm starting to lose it now. They've started to have media reports on a bit more of a positive spin. I hope it's carried on, because quite frankly, I don't watch the news anymore for good reason. And that's that question. Take a breath, and we'll come back and carry on.